Humanity is a fractious bunch. Even in a world with demons and freakish monsters from hell, where people should unite against a common foe, the Ooga Booga brain sometimes kicks in. The cavemen grab their sharpened sticks and stone clubs, and they march halfway across the world to beat down another tribe. To be fair, this conflict was inevitable. You can't go around calling yourself the Empire of the Dragon when there's already an emperor sitting in Altdorf. That just won't do. So it's time to roll out the Panzer division and storm the breadbasket of the East. The Empire marches on Cathay, and I must apologize because I believe this is my first replay of the Empire since Immortal Empires early access. I will admit they aren't my favorite faction, that neither of these races excite me to the degree that, say, Chaos Dwarfs do, but still, it's been too long, and balloons and tanks will hopefully make up for that, because this one was a doozy. Cathay, for their part, is investing heavily in the artillery battle here. Skyjunk, Iron Hail Shotgunners, Double Grand Bombards, and Zhao Ming the Iron Dragon, Final Transmutation, Constellation of the Dragon, and Dragon's Breath. A lot of crossbows, Jade Warriors, Jade Lancers. They may have had their fair share of struggles in Dom, but in land battle, they are certainly no slouches. They thrive in this element. Mortars will do what they can to soften up the enemy before both armies clash, but Cathay will be able to force the Empire across the beaten zone and into range of all of their guns. And on the Empire side, we've got a pretty interesting build. The Emperor's Wrath Steam Tank is the centerpiece unit here, a behemoth that can batter and bludgeon its way through hordes of infantry and shoot cannonballs with relatively high accuracy. It can vent steam in an emergency and explodes on death, which can be quite gnarly. But the Empire is giving up a lot to get it. It's very expensive, and it's not very good in artillery duels. No regular cannons for counter battery here, and also bringing the steam tank makes it hard to afford knights when it's coming in at like 2,200 gold. So while Karl Franz and Deathclaw and the steam tank are a substantial threat to Cathay, investing so much in those two units does leave the Empire weaker in other areas. Artillery duel, definitely going to go Cathay's way. And the mobility game. Also, I think Cathay has a slight advantage there as well. They have Zhao Ming the Iron Dragon, who will not beat Karl Franz in a straight-up duel, but of course has some additional utility from the fact that he has AoE spells and other kinds of debuffs and ways to wave clear. And he's accompanied by Jade Lancers, which there are no Imperial Knights on the Empire side. Now, Karl Franz has Galmaraz and his Reichling Runefang, so I really think he'll kind of raffle stomp Zhao Ming in a straight-up duel, at least if Zhao Ming sits in the pocket, which he would be pretty stupid to do. I don't expect that. But there's a great sword core, and that's really where the Empire has their advantage in this one. So, the Carroburg Greatswords are on the field as well. Bathe in Blood gives them +5 melee attack and +4 leadership. They are unbreakable. They should be able to cut their way through quite a few of those Jade Warriors, and 2 more Greatswords accompanying them should allow them to cut their way through the armored core of this Cathay front line. Now, sniping out enemy single entities is generally not a bad idea, but if you're going to invest time shooting at the Skyjunk with a steam tank, you do want to make sure that you can actually kill it. So if you spend half the battle shooting into it, you might as well spend the other half to ensure that it dies before it shoots all of its ammunition. Otherwise, you're basically just wasting all those shots, right? Because it's still going to be able to shoot at peak efficiency the entire time it's up in the air. Problem with fighting Cathay, of course, is that there's kind of a dearth of targets to shoot at that are actually worth shooting, especially with a Panzer that only fires a single round ball per volley. Deathclaw doing Deathclaw things, making peasants poop their pants with Blood Roar and vicious swipes. Cathay gonna counterpunch with a frontal charge into unbraced spears, and the Imperial advance has been broken up a bit by the terrain, perhaps a bit disorganized, as some of the infantry are slowed on those terraces moving through the muck. Ideally, the Emperor would love to get into a duel with the Iron Dragon, but he can't afford to until his blunderbuss units are dealt with because he would just get shot out of the sky. Pistoliers not going to be able to put a lot of pressure on the Cathayan back line, and those lack of knights will make it difficult to silence those cannons as well. Cannons that have already destroyed the mortars and are now focusing their fire towards the steam tank. So the Empire is going to be relying on the steam tank to move in and probably do a lot of damage in melee, cause some terror routes in the center, Karl Franz in the sky, of course. But really, I think a lot of the heavy lifting will fall on the backs of those great swords. They need to cut through these peasants and Jade Warriors quickly. If they aren't able to do that, it's probably going to be a very short battle. The good thing about having those Carroburg Greatswords is that not only are they unbreakable and certainly have the ability to slice their way through any Cathayan infantry in the game, even Celestial Dragon Guard, they also give a +4 leadership and +5 melee attack aura, which will let them hit even harder for the units that are nearby. So with the help from Hold the Line, Karl Franz moving in overhead, that's a lot of buffs that will be hitting the front line and should allow them to engage even more effectively. Even though Jade Warriors are an incredibly cost-effective unit, I think most factions in the game would love to have an infantry regiment like that one. That cheap, that much armor, that tanky. Greatswords should be able to kill them, but will they be able to kill them fast? I'm actually not so sure. One thing I do know is they are a prime target for that sky junk overhead, blasting in from the flank. Aerial artillery, certainly a useful unit in this kind of scenarios, because Karl Franz is going to have his hands full dealing with everything else, and he's one of the only ways the Empire have right now to compromise the back line. And I think the steam tank sitting in the back shooting is not the right call. I think it needs to move up immediately into the tree line, get a regrowth sent its way, and then start charging into melee to break these infantry units quickly. Now, really nice play from the Celestial Loyalist there. Essentially, the Greatswords were about to charge the Jade Warrior crossbowmen in the back. Jade Lancers feinted a charge to force the Greatswords to turn around and countercharge, and essentially gave them a little bit more time and space to get a point-blank volley in, while Karl Franz and Gal Moraz are positively feasting on the ladies with shotguns. This is an area Cathay will struggle with a bit, at least until they get their first DLC. Lack of any unit with punch, mass, and speed all combined can make it challenging to deal with a monster like an Imperial Griffon, and so Deathclaw will gorge himself on the rear as Zhao Ming lets it rip with a Dragon's Breath towards those Carroburg Greatswords that have broken their enemies in the center and are now advancing relentlessly towards the back. Steam Tank has been the subject of much focused fire from the cannons, but it's now safe in the tree line, mended by regrowth, and really performing its role as a distraction card effect quite well. If the cannons keep shooting at them, they're going to be wasting their time. They can't get through all those trees, but it will need to charge into the fray sooner rather than later to give the Imperials more teeth in the melee grind, and combine that with Blood Roar, that terror could be really impactful, as Karl Franz is demonstrating right now. Multiple units are breaking off. Grand Bombards are now in the danger zone, and if the Greatswords are able to cut through those Jade Warrior crossbowmen, we could see the artillery finally fall silent, and that would be a huge win for the Empire. Deathclaw is plunging down into the fray, but that will expose his flank and rear to the Iron Dragon, who's summoning all kinds of swords and shoving them up the Imperial Griffon's butt. See if Karl Franz decides to run away. I think he might need to, because pinned up against the cannon, if a point-blank volley from those Iron Hail Gunners who just returned hits him from the side, it's going to be extremely unpleasant. Some buffs from Gal Moraz will allow him to trade okay, but he needs to run and probably get some help from the Jade Wizard, otherwise he might be in trouble. So Steam Tank is getting quite close to the front line, and it's looking like it might be needed ASAP, because those Greatswords are barely hanging on by a thread, just swarmed by a horde of Jade Warriors. And the Steam Tank, where it's sitting right now, its cannon isn't even able to shoot into those infantry formations. Hill blocked some of those shots there, so yes, finally charging in. Regrowth did get it back up to about 4/5 HP. Obviously, the idea of a tank being mended by a regrowth doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but frankly, I don't think a steam tank would be all that viable if you couldn't heal it. So there is that. But perhaps if a master engineer was added to the game, that could be a new way to effectively repair your steam tank on the fly, and maybe they could get rid of the life magic affecting inanimate objects. You're an inanimate freaking object! Karl Franz has a regrowth sent his way. That is going to be extremely important as you move into the later stages, keeping Karl Franz alive. Him and his steam tank together. Those two single entities are still alive, then the Empire has a chance. There's still hordes of Cathayan infantry to deal with, and of course Zhao Ming is full HP, and Deathclaw is being shot in the flank by cannons, which is not really ideal, but both of them have the potential to get back up to pretty much full HP from that Jade Wizard, and if that happens, then Zhao Ming might have his hands full in a duel with the Imperial Griffon. Steam Tank, everywhere it treads, we're seeing terror routes, all kinds of routing on the Cathayan side, and Jade Lancers can't do anything to the steam tank. Even if they got a full surround off, all that would do is pin it in place. They're not going to deal much damage to it. They don't have enough AP for that. And of course, all of this is setting it up for Karl Franz to dive into the rear, because that Emperor's Wrath is tying up a huge section of the Celestial Loyalists army. There are some Jade Crossmen up on the Rice Terrace above. Might be able to get some volleys in, and the Iron Gunners have returned. Great swords being exploded at point blank range, and quite a few of them are losing their heads. Looks like they are going to rout before they're able to close the gap. But the Empire's making a lot of headway at the summit of this hill. Jade Lancers are forced to retreat in the face of the Emperor's Wrath, and now Deathclaw has another clean charge into those Iron Hail Gunners. He will take a volley to the face as he closes in, but he'll take that every single time, especially if he's able to finally silence these blunderbusses for good. So Jade Lancers are coming in from behind. Zhao Ming is as well, and of course Karl Franz recognizes the danger. Jade Wizard coming in with another clutch regrowth to give him a life-saving burst of HP and allow him to survive for at least a little bit longer. Steam Tank should probably just go into melee with those gunners and cannons now. Carroburg Greatswords down to 98 HP, only 3 models remaining. I don't even see where the other 2 are. I'm only seeing the 1 green marker, but they'll make their last stand. 57 health now. I would not expect them to last for too much longer. Pistoliers really haven't done a whole lot, really haven't called their name at all. They're going to charge in to tie down these Jade Warrior crossbows, hammer and anvil, quote unquote, while Karl Franz charges in from the front. Emperor's Wrath, making sure these Iron Hail Gunners are burnt and corroded, and that they disappear from the battlefield entirely. We'll see how much time he has to spend to finally shatter them, though. They have routed and rallied many times over at this point. Now a very interesting duel. Galmaraz and the Reichland Rune Fang. Look at Karl Franz's stats. Almost 700 weapon strength now, 80 melee attack, and that is not counting his bonus first large. So Zhao Ming, who was looking quite healthy beforehand, well, it's pretty much what we were expecting. The dragon can't take him in a straight fight, even though he had quite a bit more HP. When Karl Franz has his items activated, there are few lords or monsters in the game that can take him 1v1. It's almost like his hammer is the symbol of the setting or something. Crazy how that works. So Zhao Ming is fleeing for his life. Jade Lancers realize that they can't do a whole lot here. Blood Roar causes them to run. Jade Wizard fighting a bunch of Jade Warrior crossmen. Way too many dragons, way too many Jade in this battle, but it's working out okay for the Empire because the balance of power is now in their favor. Sky Junk is entirely out of ammunition, is now literally a useless unit. It adds nothing except maybe a sliver on the balance of power, and I don't even know if it does that. But Zhao Ming is now fighting the Emperor's Wrath, and the Steam Tank had to do this, right? It's going to be hard for Karl Franz and the Steam Tank to link up. Ideally, Deathclaw would love to come over and charge the Iron Dragon from behind. But the Steam Tank had to worry about the cannons and had to worry about the shotgunners, so it did the right thing. The problem is that in so doing, it is isolated and forced to fight a Lord that it simply cannot defeat when it only has like 36 melee attack and 10 melee defense. There's no way he's going to be able to land many attacks against a dragon with 50-50 stats. So that will allow Karl Franz to continue munching up all this cav and infantry, and I would expect to see more terror routes imminent for the Cathay front line, but the Steam Tank is probably going to die here, and the Emperor's Wrath is going to start looking like the Emperor's Kitten as a plaything for the son of the dragon, now being bathed in napalm. Can the Emperor's Wrath hold on for a little bit longer? Allow Karl Franz to close the gap. He's got 255 health remaining. Karl Franz is on his way. Perhaps one more attack from the Iron Dragon will do it. Yes, it explodes, and apparently it sends out a burnt contact effect and deals some single target damage when it explodes. Didn't notice how much HP was dealt to Zhao Ming there, but Karl Franz landed in from behind, and with a couple of attacks, might be able to cause Zhao Ming to flee. But the Empire army is essentially gone. It's just Karl Franz and the Life Mage. I'm not seeing anything else. Carroburg Greatswords are dead and in the dirt. All the other great swords have routed off. See a few of those moving towards the edge of the map now. I cannot believe those Iron Hail Gunners have rallied for the 3rd or 4th time this battle. Absolutely insane. Karl Franz is continuing his hunt of the Iron Dragon, though. If he's able to kill the single entity monster and the Lord, the leadership anchor for Cathay, then things might shift in the Empire's favor. Battle Spur is still almost dead even, and Zhao Ming is fleeing towards the edges of the map, but Karl Franz is beginning to get pincushioned by the remaining Jade Warriors with crossbows. You could kill all this infantry, I don't think any problem at all, but the crossbows firing in, dealing their damage, and perhaps a few shots from the crane guns on that sky junk are making it too difficult. He'll be staggered. Jade Wizard will be forced to fight alone and surrounded by Jade Lancers. No chance for him. That is going to be your battle. Cathay takes it with a sliver of HP remaining on Zhao Ming. And hell, if the Empire had been able to kill him, I think it might have been a mass rout. So that was a real close one. Fire Rain Rocket Battery from the sky junk. And perhaps a few shots from the crossbows. Taking down the Emperor, and the Empire of the Dragon will stand firm as it has done so for the last 4,000, 5,000 years. So in this battle, couple things about army composition. Honestly, Pistoliers sucked. I would not bring them again against Cathay. Much of their front line, all of their mobility has 90 plus armor and missile block chance. Pistoliers just don't do enough damage to that. Karl Franz was awesome at 2,600 damage value, and of course if you're bringing him and a steam tank, Life Wizard is the only wizard you are ever going to bring there. Emperor's Wrath was, I think, really fun to use, but probably not the right call. It's not helpful enough in counter battery. It's not good enough at killing enemy artillery to silence them by itself. So just 2 or 3 Grand Cannons or a pure melee rush from the Empire would be more competitive, would be more viable than this kind of strat. I think I had to give up too much there to get the steam tank in my army. The Greatswords did an okay job cutting through the front line and getting into the rear, but without anything to pressure the back with Imperial Knights or Knights of the Blazing Sun or Reichsguard, it basically meant that those cannons stayed online for a really long time. The Sky Junk stayed online for a really long time, and a lot of those racked up over 2,000 damage value and really hurt me. So maybe drop those Pistoliers and get Outriders instead. I wouldn't say drop the steam tank, because the whole point of this replay was to bring the steam tank, because it's a unit I absolutely adore. But if you're looking at this from a competitive standpoint, I would say probably not the play against Cathay. Go for a wider build with more speed out on the flanks, drop the steam tank, dive in from behind, a couple great swords to deal with the Jade Warriors, and you should have a better army.